Welcome to The Back Cover, the podcast that explores the classic soul music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Karen Williams. Join me and my co-host Steve Williams, no, we're not related, as we flip over the album covers and share stories of the movers and shakers that created, wrote, and produced those iconic sounds. We'll educate and entertain you, all while keeping the music alive. August is the birth month of Michael Jackson, and no matter what you think about him, he has impacted the music industry tremendously since he first stepped foot on the stage in 1969. Well, that is, publicly. But this year, Steve and I wanted to also include the music of Michael and the Jacksons. I mean, without the Jacksons, there would be no Michael Jackson. So sit back and listen to our stories about the Jacksons. And I am referencing most of my material, some I know personally, but most of it is The Long Journey to Glory, My Side of the Jackson Story by Reynaud D. Jones. You can find this book on Amazon. It not only talks about the origins of the Jacksons, but his adventures with them after they became famous.
Here's the first big, huge lie.
Big, huge lie.
The biggest one.
Okay.
Contrary to what you might have heard down through the years, and I mean no disrespect about this, but Diana Ross did not, I say again, did not discover the Jackson 5. As a matter of fact, she didn't even know anything about them.
Right. In fact, the whole story around the Jacksons has been branded by Motown because they wanted a story, to go along with them to sell them.
Because Stevie Wonder's mother had drove Berry Gordy nuts.
Yeah, because, they were little kids. Yeah, he didn't want to work with them.
At all.
Because of Stevie. Not that Stevie was probably a terrible person.
But his mama was.
His mother, he was more concerned about the parents, stage parents, than he was about. And then, the liability of having little kids on the road. And
yes, use that big word, liability.
Yeah, you're talking 5 as compared to one Stevie who was blind.
Yes.
So you're talking about 5-sided little boys with hormones just popping.
Raging even.
So, he was a little leery, but once he heard them.
He was shocked.
He was shocked. Say it again, Steve.
Shocked.
Just shocked.
Just shocked.
So I'm going to be giving you guys some history. Interesting history. Even Steve don't know some of this stuff.
I didn't live in Gary.
But I'm using the book, The Long Journey to Glory, My Side of the Jackson Stories by Reynaud Jones. Now, I have to do a disclaimer. Reynaud, now listen to this, Steve. Reynaud is my cousin's cousin.
Nick on your mama's side.
My cousin on my mama's side, but Reynaud is my cousin's cousin on his grandmama's side. So we don't have no blood, but we all lived in the same neighborhood. And you know how it is in black families.
Went to the same church.
Yeah, well, same schools. But Reynaud is older than me because he's as old as Jackie. He's a little older than Jackie, I think.
Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe about a year or so. But he's on... Okay, so this is how it goes. I'm going to start from the beginning, and then I'm going to break it up all throughout the show so you all don't get confused, okay?
All right. Here's how it go.
Here you go. Y'all ready? Here you go.
The song that got them out of the Midwest.
I ain't through yet. I'm getting ready to tell them how it go. Then you can do that.
Oh.
Okay.
Karen Williams.
Okay, here it goes.
And here it is.
So I am probably the only person who says that they did not know the Jacksons in my neighborhood. Everybody else knew them.
You did.
I didn't because my grandma didn't let me wander the neighborhood.
What?
I had to stay on my block. So I lived 2 streets over. Get this in your mind now. 2 streets over.
Gary ain't that big, y'all.
2 streets up. 3 blocks up, I mean. However, my cousins, all of them, blood or by marriage, all lived
hook or crook,
like within a block of the Jacksons. So they knew them. I did not. So Reynaud, who is my cousin's cousin,
On your mama's side.
on his mama's side,
Oh, no.
Reynaud, and back in the day, Gary had a lot of talent. I mean, lots of talent. People were
Falling out of the tree.
falling out.
Singing.
People singing. Denise Williams came out of here, and some other folks who played in bands that are famous now came from out here. Yeah, athletes. And so it was a hotbed of African American talent. So the Jacksons actually didn't start off as the Jacksons. And the first person, because Reynaud was in a singing group, and he was pretty good with the guitar. He lived right down the street from the Jacksons. So he said one day he was walking down the street, and Tito yelled out the window, "Hey, Jonesy, look what I got." And he held up Joe's guitar. Now, everybody knew that Joe didn't play that with his guitar. And he's like, "Man, what you gonna?" He said, "I need you to teach me how to, because you a good guitarist and you're in a group. Teach me how to do this." So Tito was the first one. He came over to Reynaud's basement, and they would sit there because Joe was at work. And they would sit there, and he would teach him some chords and stuff. And that's how they got started. It didn't start with Joe putting them together. It didn't start any other way but with Tito and Reynaud in the basement of Reynaud's house learning these keys.
You had to be Reynaud's house because that little house ain't big enough for a basement.
And they didn't have no basement. So that is how they got started. So I'm going to stop right there. Stay tuned for part 2.
You're wondering, how did they get discovered? Well, I've told you, it wasn't Diana.
No.
At all. And their first record deal wasn't with Motown.
No.
But now, there was a little label out of Chicago called Wonderful. Down on 20th and South Michigan.
Right.
Now, they did release a record. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew who they were.
No.
But it sounded like little cat scratching on the window.
Yeah.
And Michael had to be about, what, 2-ish?
Well, he might have been.
I know he was older than that.
He might have been 8 or 9 then.
Now, according to my sources in Chicago.
I have to verify them, but go ahead.
You don't. Shut up. When they cut that song, here's the thing. WVON was the station of the day.
Right.
But the thing is, my sources revealed to me that a certain person he was a friend of mine, wouldn't play it.
And why was that?
He didn't like it. See, this is how it goes down the line. When a record comes in, it's given to the music director. And then he gets the okay from the program director to add it to the playlist. Back in those days, Herb was the music director.
Herb Kent.
Yeah.
And he didn't like it. Not so much.
Not so much. Not so much. But what got him played? Lucky Cordell.
Ah, Mr. Cordell.
Mr. Cordell, who was a friend of said friend from said record company. Wonderful.
Wonderful Records.
See, if you don't know nobody.
You got to know people.
But here's one thing, though. The feather in the cap was still the feather in the cap. Well, Joe is gone, but Marshall Thompson of the Shylights.
Okay.
He and Joe were very good friends back in the day.
Right.
Very good friends.
Well, what people don't know is that Joe, too, was a musician.
Yes.
And that's why he had a guitar. He specialized in the blues. Or, back in the day, real R&B. He liked music from Stax.
Oh, yeah, he wants that hard. It wasn't all hardcore, but he liked the rhythms.
Yeah, he liked the rhythms and stuff. So he had a little band that he practiced with, including his brother. And they were, I think people say they were an okay group. They weren't outstanding, but they were okay.
They could do a gig.
They could do a gig, nothing real fancy, but but he loved music. That was his thing. That was his relaxation. Because when you got 9 kids, you got to do something else. when you come home. And
if not, drink.
Right, and they all there, you know.
All.
So let me frame the Jackson family for you. All right? Okay. They were very, a lot of people in the community said they were odd. Let's just be real. But they didn't participate with the other kids a lot because they weren't allowed to roam free either. That's why I didn't know them. They couldn't roam. I couldn't roam. They had to stay on their own block within a certain amount, you know, they had this stuff. Now, the one thing after the boys got a little bit older, and I'm talking about like Jermaine and Jackie
in the
and
early
Tito,
teens.
In the teens, they were allowed to play baseball, you know, Little League. In fact, Jackie was a very good senior league baseball player and had been drafted by the Chicago White Sox.
The farm club.
The farm club when he was going to graduate. But, of course, you know, he had to stick with the family.
Oh, no, you got to be with the brothers.
Oh, yeah. So he had to give that dream up. But he was very good. And but the Jacksons were a very set-aside group. And they weren't allowed to mix with a lot of people in the neighborhood. They knew the people. Now, Miss Jackson was very nice. People liked her. Mm-hmm. They even liked the kids. But, you know, the other kids are like, they weird. They don't, you know, whatever. Okay, so, and Reynaud was like the only person, he said, who was allowed to come to their house. Now, nobody was allowed to come to their house. So when he started the Jacksons, and he claims he started the Jacksons, he said it was Tito. And so eventually after him and Tito started getting together, he decided, well, let's put a group together. So he went and got his friend Milford, who lived next door to my cousin.
The drummer.
The drummer, Milford, who was not the original drummer that went to California with them. It was a neighborhood guy.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Milford's height and Reynaud and Tito, and they got together, and they were going to do like a little set. Like, you know, they were getting a band together. Now, the other rumor is that Miss Jackson made the first costumes for her boys.
The green ones.
Not true. Not true. Their first costumes were made by Mrs. Height, Milford's mother.
Oh, that's the lady I saw in the book.
I guess. I don't know. But anyway, so they did that. And so eventually, once Tito got going, then Jermaine came over wanting to know what's going on. And then they were like, okay, so then Jermaine joined the group, and they taught Jermaine how to play. And so then eventually, because Jermaine and Tito were going over to Reynaud's house, here comes Jackie wanting to know what is his brother's doing. But because he was the oldest, he had to bring Michael and Marvin.
He had to babysit.
He was the babysitter. So now they all are down in the basement. Jackie, Jermaine, and Tito are getting serious. The two little brothers are a pain in the butt.
They just ripping and running.
They just ripping and running in the basement. And they're like, sit down, sit down, sit down. And he said the one thing that Michael did, because he was mad, he took a hammer and beat a hole in the couch that was in the basement. His mother, he said, my mother's orange couch.
It died.
He beat a hole in it.
He could buy a whole furniture.
He said that couch stayed like that way after the Jacksons were famous. He said we put orange tape on it, and it just sat in the basement. Wow. So that's the beginning of the Jackson. Had nothing to do with Joe. Joe knew nothing about what they were doing because he was at work. They only did it when he was at work. And after they really got going, because Reynaud, who was older than them, really loved James Brown. He was a James Brown fanatic.
They practiced on that song.
They practiced and they imitated James Brown. So I'll tell you some more. Chapter 3. After these messages.
By her saying that, the first time they ever were beat at the Regal Theater talent show
in Chicago,
there was a group that was produced by the Curtis Mayfield. And they had one thing no other group had.
What?
A girl. Oh, my goodness. And they mimicked the Impressions. And I was told by my sources that was one heck of a talent show that night, because it was the very first time that the Jacksons had endured
a loss, because they were regional hits. And I'll tell you how they got to be a regional hit after Steve.
Ladies and gentlemen, the only group that ever beat Michael Jackson or his brothers, they are called, well, were called, the Five Stair Steps.
So Reynaud, who was their friend, he too was in a separate group. It was called the Epics. And that's why they came to him, because they were like, dude, your group is like so big in the area, because they had gone to Chicago and performed too. And they were like, teach us what you know. And then he was like, okay, I'll teach you what I know. And that's how they ended up being that. So anyway, as I've said before, Tito was the first one, and then the other ones followed. So he thought, well, we've been practicing. We've been looking at, all of our favorite performers, and everything. They finally got Michael. When they figured out that Michael could sing, they finally started letting him sing. And he said he was the one who thought, this is cute. This could sell us. This little dude right here can sing, and we can be famous. The little dude can sing. So they started, with Michael singing and doing stuff. So when they got it all together, they had to come up with a name for themselves. So, Steve, guess what name they came up with?
I don't even want to attempt.
You will never guess what their original name, what they were going to call themselves.
This is the original name of the Jackson 5.
Juquan and the Torianos.
Who is Juquan?
They just made it up. We need at that time, they thought I was a fast fan.
Sound like a bullfighting team. And I just learned that name, Toriano. That's Tito's name.
That's Tito's real name. That's why they called him, because Tito was the first one in the group. Anyway, so that didn't fly. But, so, as we're moving now, the group has formed. They have figured out that Michael should be,
the front man,
the little dancing guy, and should be fun. And anyway, they said that was the only way they kept him in line, because if they didn't give him anything to do, he and Marlon
be all over the place.
So they included him in the group. By now, Tito has learned a couple of notes on the guitar. Jermaine has learned a couple, because there were actually 2 guitars in their household. One they said belonged to Joe, and the other one they believe belonged to his uncle.
That would be the bass.
Yeah.
So he had no other choice.
Right. So, and if you come to Gary now, you will see that guitar at the Hard Rock. It's on display.
Because you remember me asking Tito, hey man, what kind of guitar was your father's? He said, that one out there in the front. I said, yeah. Rockenbacher.
Okay. Rockenbacher.
A German-made guitar.
Yeah. So anyway, now Reynaud has decided, well, let's get some gigs. So guess how they started? And most of you, if you are a Jackson fan, know this. They started doing parties in the neighborhood.
No kidding.
Yeah. They started doing parties even before the talent shows. That's how they got their feet wet. They started doing parties. And one of the parties they did was for Reynaud's mother's backyard club, bridge club.
Yeah.
And they thought, oh, he's so cute. Michael, again, he was right about that. Oh, Michael is cute. People will like him.
Put him out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then our friend Nakia Barksdale, who has a show on here, her mother, my friend, had them at her 10th birthday party. They performed at her 10th birthday party. So they were doing birthday parties and backyard gigs as the Juquan and the Torianos. But then all heck broke loose, because Joe found out that they were performing.
Get out.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Joe did not put them together initially.
It was Juquan.
It was Reynaud Jones who put them together initially, and Milford Height, who was their drummer in the neighborhood. And Miss Height made their little costumes. So then, after they got that, the big test was they had to perform at Roosevelt High School's talent show, which was the biggest high school talent show in the city.
Won.
And Joe did not want to come and see them.
No.
He had to beg Joe to come, because Joe said, I don't want them getting up there embarrassing me. You imagine?
Uh-huh.
And so they...
Not embarrassing themselves, but
embarrassing him.
Yeah.
So he convinced them. He got tickets for him to come, and they came. And Reynaud also played guitar with them.
Oh.
Because he was a better guitar player than they were. But he was in the background. He didn't stand up front with them.
Mm-hmm.
They performed, and he said that's when the spark hit Joe. Like, damn. I got something I can sell right here.
Don't cost you nothing. Just feed
them and clothe them. And that's when Reynaud lost control of the Jackson 5. In fact, they did another talent show, and there was the lady who was the promoter said, "What do you all call yourselves?" And they were like, the Jackson Brothers. And she's like, "Oh, no, that sounds so, ooh. Call yourself the Jackson 5. Her name was Evelyn LaHaye. Wow. And that's how they got the name Jackson 5. She convinced Joe to change their name from the Jackson Brothers to the Jackson 5.
Yeah, that sounds a little country.
Jackson
We're
Brothers.
the Jackson Brothers.
So now they are the Jackson 5, and they're getting to move on up. As I've said, we've gotten them up to where Joe has accepted the fact that they're going to be something. And while we're talking about that, let's talk about Joe, because there's a lot of things that people say he was harsh, he was mean, he was abusive. But, even Reynaud says in his book, which is called The Long Journey to Glory by Reynaud D. Jones, he even says in his book that, you got to give Joe credit because Joe came from the South. He worked in the mill. He just had a dream that he thought it was going to be him. He wanted, to be the musician. That's what they were striving. Where he wanted to get out of the mill.
Yeah.
And he wanted to get out of Gary. And it didn't happen for him, but he saw it in his kids. But even before that, he didn't want his children roaming the street. He had boys. And so, as you know, boys are horrible people, And so he was very stern with them, It was.
I resent that statement.
And so he was, he was stern on his daughters, and, didn't want, because girls, might get taken advantage of or whatever. Rebe left early. She left right out of high school.
Yeah.
She didn't want to be under his thumb.
Here.
Yeah. So, he could have been a little mean. And by mean, I mean super strict. But I don't think he was to the point of just like, some people have said he was abusive. Now, we not in the household. We don't know. But let's look at the track record here. None of them went to jail.
At all.
They became the first family of music in America.
Yeah.
They made billions of dollars.
Billions. Ain't none of them broke.
Ain't none of them really broke. They may be a little skint every once in a while, but they ain't broke.
They ain't broke.
So, you could half dozen of one, half dozen on the other. People from the South have a different
look at
things, a different structure. So you got to look at it like that.
Michael, when they got to Motown, remember, they were around all of the people that they were listening to on the radio before they became famous.
Right.
And then at the Regal Theater, they got to perform around people that they knew they had been listening to and seeing.
Right.
Michael fell in love because his father told him, pay attention to that Ruffin guy. Yeah, pay attention. You think I'm worse. Joe told Michael to watch David Ruffin. Watch how he throws the microphone up, does a split, turn around, and catch it before it hits the ground.
Right.
He said, watch every move. Watch every move. He also told, I found out, Marlon. See, Marlon has a falsetto as well.
They all got falsetto.
Yeah, but his is a little higher than Jackie's.
Okay.
And he was very shy.
Yeah, they all were very shy.
They got him to harmonize.
Right.
But when he got to Motown, he got to meet and hang out with David Ruffin. And they became lifelong friends. As a matter of fact, Michael loved him so much when David passed away, Michael paid for his funeral.
Yeah.
He told his sons and daughters, don't worry about the cost. Get whatever you want to get.
Mm-hmm. But before they left Gary, they performed at a club called Mr. Lucky's.
And they saw...
And they were up there with grown people.
Strippers even.
And it was a nightclub, and they would come in
in the back. Yep.
They would perform, and then they would leave. But it was like late at night. But some of the performers who came through there was like Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers.
Who really discovered them.
They saw a lot of performers. Now, 2 performers that we always play on this station that they also mimicked. Jackie Wilson
and James Brown.
That's where you see Michael's athleticism come from when he was younger, when he was doing all those spins.
He was mimicking them.
He was mimicking them.
Because both Jackie Wilson and James Brown were early boxers.
Mm-hmm. And they were very limber.
Now, one thing that he did steal from James Brown that he didn't steal from Jackie Wilson. James Brown was notorious for wearing jumpsuits.
Oh, okay, yeah.
All right, and when he started wearing jumpsuits, he had started getting portly.
Okay, yeah.
And they would kind of tug in certain spots.
Uh-huh.
So he saw James do a split and put his hand in a place that most men put their hands in to pull themselves up from the split. He did it one night at a show at that nightclub we're talking about, and Joe asked him when he got off stage, who told you to do that? I saw Mr. Brown do it. This stuff it's not made up. It's all been written. It's all been written down.
Yeah. And so, so he and Michael was a great study of other performers. I mean, Fred Astaire, he loved Fred Astaire's moves. He also did the Fayad and that was married to
the
Nicholas Brothers.
Yes.
If you've ever seen the Nicholas Brothers dance perform,
that wasn't dancing. That was just pure performance.
And he looked at all of them and he incorporated that in his solo act. And when he was with the brothers too. So he was a study of his craft. It wasn't like I'm just gonna get out here and just fling my body around. No, he practiced. And if you saw the last thing he did, which was This Is It, did you ever see the documentary?
I did.
That brother had a work ethic.
He did.
That was intense. And you know where he got it from? Joe Jackson.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, once Joe got involved, them little boys had to practice.
They had to work.
All the time. So much so, and I've told Steve this story. We were right behind they lived right behind the high school. High school had a huge band that practiced, after school and all the time.
As most high schools
do.
Yeah.
But around 6:00 in the evening, I would still hear this music because we were only like 3 or 4 blocks away. I would still hear these drums and this music, and Milford and Reynaud were out of the picture by this time.
Okay.
Reynaud had gone to the Air Force. Milford had graduated high school, so they had put their cousin as a drummer. So I would hear these drums and this little ding ding ding, stuff, and I'm like, why is a high school band practicing at 6:30 at night and 7:00? And my cousin was like, that ain't the band, that's them Jacksons. They practice all the time. This is before they were famous.
Hey.
And he was hating on them Jacksons. Jackie think he can sing. You know what, Miss
Jackson?
No, the band, the singer, the teacher at Roosevelt, he was in the chorus. He was in the boys' chorus.
Okay.
She said she told him he can't even sing. And he up there singing with him. Look how big he is compared to them little big kids. He was hating on them so hard.
Big mistake.
Huge. And then ended up going to California to see him when they got famous. I'm like, you used to hate on them. Well,
That's what usually happens.
But anyway, yeah. So, Miss Brooks, who was, let me put it like this, who was the old dude on Deep Space Nine's mother?
What?
Spencer for Hire.
Yeah.
His mother was the high school.
Oh.
See, we all recollect related together there. So yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah. Avery Brooks, yeah. His mom was the chorus teacher at the high school that Jackie sang in.
Jermaine shocks every woman in the world when he marries the daughter of Berry Gordy, Hazel.
People were like,
What? That feathered afro took that woman, and sisters went nuts. You leaving Michael?
he marrying her?
They had a $6 million wedding. And that was in the 70s, right?
75, 4,
That
6.
would be like 20 million right now.
Yeah.
And they stayed married what? Long enough to have 2 kids?
Well, they stay married together. Maybe 4 or 5 years or something.
Yeah.
She was older than he.
Uh-huh.
He was like 19 maybe.
But she was in the house.
She was in her 20s.
Daddy was trying to get out of his pocket. And at that time, Joe did not like that.
I didn't like it. I'm like, he's too young to be marrying her. Who was I, like 15, 16?
Oh, girl.
We were all like, no.
Y'all still jailbait.
No, we can't marry her. Why he marrying her?
He did.
That was the whole thing, you know.
And he wasn't greasy then. It was all still in his afro.
Yeah, he was still.
A feathered afro at that.
He was still cute.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He had that nice fro. They all had those beautiful afros.
Oh, yeah. They had some froze.
Oh, yeah. And they were all trimmed and perfectly round.
That's why it took them so long to come on stage.
They had to pick out the froze.
Gene told me that over at the other station.
What?
Gene said, man, why used to take y'all shot lights so long to get dressed? Because Dick Clark used to always complain about y'all. Man, we be back trying to put them uniforms on and pick out our froze.
Yeah, because he had a good fro, too.
See?
That's what I'm saying. But anyway, but yeah, so if you listen to the lyrics, Steve and I were just saying, don't take it personal.
Don't take it personal. He was trying to tell his brothers, hey, man.
It's time for me to go.
Time for me to get on.
You
and
all,
it could have been to Joe, too.
Yeah.
Because he was still managing them.
Yeah.
But he didn't want them to be taught anything by Berry Gordy. Because he said, man, Berry Gordy finally got one of my sons to call him daddy.
Yep, he did. He was like always fighting that Barry's influence. And, you know, I can kind of understand because, you know, Barry was controlling.
But the world was just shocked.
Yeah.
That was the wedding of that year.
Yeah. Michael said that when Jermaine left, because Jermaine was always on his left. If you look at their lineup has not changed. Well, it has now.
And it was all about height as well.
Yeah, when they first started. And
right.
Bernard said that was their original lineup when they first started singing in talent shows. They had not changed even when they left and went to Motown and left and went to they always did that. And Jermaine was always at Michael's left. And he said that when Jermaine left the group, he just felt, and you can kind of see it in some of his first performances when Jermaine wasn't there. Michael looks a little sad.
Got to be there.
Yep, he was you could tell he was a little sad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, put yourself in his place.
Yep.
You've grown up with these people.
Right. And now we got this rift.
We got this rift, and it can't be fused together. But when they made that one move, it changed the lineup forever.
And then they became, after they stayed there a little bit, they didn't stay too long after Jermaine married. They kind of left.
He was...
In 1976.
They then transferred... Everybody was fighting over him. They wanted the Jacksons.
Because they had been truly huge hit makers.
And Michael and Joe were starting not to get along because they were fighting over material. Michael had learned how to produce.
And his voice was changing. He wanted a more mature sound.
He took lessons, voice lessons.
And then there were some personal family issues going on at the same time that kind of put a rift between them. You know what it was.
Who?
He had, had this little outside little kid. Not Michael, his dad.
His daddy.
And that kind of put a rift between
Now, he didn't even allow his own children to call him daddy.
I know.
But this girl I saw on TV, she said, Daddy would come over late at night.
Well, yeah.
He finally got out of Gary.
Yeah, and he had a famous musical family.
And he moved to where he wanted to live. Yep. California.
Yep. I don't know. To me, between 73 and when they became the Jacksons, that's also when there is a group of people who remember the Jackson 5. They're a certain age group, and they followed them up until when they got to be the Jacksons, because that group of people started getting older. You know what I'm saying? They were, older. So Michael wanted to have his music become a little bit older. So, he wanted an older sound. It was also coming into the disco years. So they kind of wanted to ride that wave too. So you'll hear the sound changes from the little, bubblegum pop kind of stuff to more disco, a little bit more, cross. If you thought Motown was crossover, when they became the Jacksons, they totally became crossover. And more people started listening to them on the regular, as we would say. Because
their last big hit on Motown was more bubblegumish than anything. Dancing Machine.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the drummer went out, Jermaine went out, in comes Randy and his bungles.
Yeah. I drove by the house the other day. There were people. People are always out there taking pictures.
And and they're getting ready for.
I don't know if they're going to do anything this year because of COVID. I'm not sure.
They always stop.
Yeah, they usually do a thing outside the house. They have music out there, and they have people who come by and they take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I haven't heard anything. Milford hadn't told me anything. Milford Height, who was the original drummer.
Yeah.
I talked to him, and he usually tells me if they're doing something, and he hasn't said anything. So I don't know. But anyway,
pay attention to your children.
Yeah, because they may have hidden talents. You too could have a Michael Jackson and don't know it.
Or LaToya. I ain't lying.
Oh, yeah, you can have a
When she was in Playboy, I bought that issue.
Thanks for listening to The Back Cover. You can catch The Back Cover on TuneIn, Stitcher, and MyTuner. You can also listen to our show, The Ride Home, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Central Standard Time on www.thesoundofsoul.net. Please have your friends and family like and subscribe to our podcast.